Those who watched my video about HEX understand that it gets harder and harder over time to receive a full T-share when making a HEX stake. The code in the smart contract is designed in such a way as for it to only go up and to the right. It's completely immutable and has helped the price of HEX go up 10,000-fold in only 2 years' time. Not bad if you were in it from the beginning, but of course most of us weren't. It might be interesting to know that Alex Werter takes advantage of this code by building decentralized applications on top of it. Welcome to Crypto Hexplained, the easiest way to educate yourself in a ride around the blockchain. Here we try to explain crypto topics as simply as possible so everyone can understand. In this video, I'll explain the full mechanism behind Icosa and how it provides Hedron with extra features. If you haven't yet, watch my video about Hedron first, as you'll need this knowledge to fully grasp the content in this video. No financial advice on this channel though. I'm just gathering the facts so my lazy friends don't have to. Icosa is a fully decentralized application built on top of HEX and Hedron. The dApp offers several features allowing you to mint Icosa, this being Hedron Staking, HSI Buy Backs, Icosa Staking, and WAATSA Staking. Just like Hedron, the code is immutable and can never be changed or stopped. As seen in my Hedron explanation, there's a way to tokenize and sell your HEX stakes on an NFT marketplace. Not every NFT will be sold immediately though. That's where the HSI buybacks come in. This feature in the Icosa protocol will buy any HSI NFT created by the Hedron protocol. This will be done at a rate calculated by the amount of borrowable Hedron with that stake divided by the HEX T-share rate as of that moment. This outcome shows you the amount of Icosa the contract will mint to buy your stake. For maximum stakes of 5,555 days, an additional bonus of 10% will be added. This makes it more attractive to make maximum HSI HEX stakes, as you're sure there's always a buyer if you're in sudden need of money. When the Icosa smart contract buys your HEX stake, it will then be detokenized, after which it will then borrow all possible Hedron against it. This is done with the intent of never repaying the loan and letting the stake go up for auction in the Hedron protocol. What happens with this borrowed amount of Hedron will become clear later in this video. Another way to mint Icosa is by staking Hedron and receiving Icosa tokens as yield. First and foremost, it's important to know where this yield is coming from, because every day that goes by, Hedron staking pools get filled with Icosa tokens. On one hand, there's a portion of Icosa that gets minted depending on the amount of Hedron that gets burned on the previous day. On the other hand, there are also earnings from Icosa end-stake penalties that will be added to this pool. I'll explain these penalties in a few minutes. The burned amount of Hedron I was talking about comes from liquidation auctions, from advances being repaid, from Hedron end-stake penalties, and from users voluntarily burning their own Hedron tokens. This can be done in the Proof of Benevolence protocol. Believe it or not, large sums of Hedron have already been burned in this protocol. The sum of these daily burned tokens then gets divided by tenfold the HEX T-share rate, which they simply call the HEX share rate. This outcome will be minted into the Hedron pool to be paid out to the stakers. As you know, the rate of a T-share is only going up, making it harder over time to fill this pool. The amount of yield each staker receives depends entirely on their total stake in that staking pool. This calculation is done at the beginning of your stake, where staking points are given for the amount of Hedron staked divided by the HEX share rate. For example, if the daily Icosa pool contains 100 Icosa and your staking points entitle you to 1% of that pool, 1 Icosa will be added to your balance for that day. The HEX share rate plays a big role again in this matter, as it rewards earlier stakers with more points for the same amount of Hedron staked as a stake done at a later moment in time. Unlike staking HEX, you don't have to indicate for how long you want to stake because there's no maximum stake duration. In other words, you can let it run for as long as you want. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years. When you end your stake is entirely up to you. What you do have to take into account, though, is the minimum duration of your stake. This depends on the stake size compared to the total circulating supply of Hedron at the start of your contract. All stakes greater than or equal to 1% of the Hedron supply are whales and must stake for a minimum of 360 days. All stakes greater than or equal to 0.1% of the Hedron supply are sharks and must stake for a minimum of 270 days. All stakes greater than or equal to 0.01% of the Hedron supply are dolphins and must stake for a minimum of 180 days. All stakes greater than or equal to 0.001% of the Hedron supply are squids and must stake for a minimum of 90 days. All smaller fish must stake for a minimum of 30 days. Each wallet can only contain one stake, but it is possible to add Hedron to that stake at any time. If you decide to add to your stake, a recalculation will be made. First of all, your share in the staking pool will change as you'll be rewarded extra staking points for your added Hedron next to your previously received staking points. This is done by dividing the added Hedron by the new HEX share rate. In this manner, a new total of staking points will determine your share in the staking pool. In addition, this new total amount of staked Hedron will be compared to the total supply of Hedron for the second time. You will definitely need to be aware of this, as this means that the minimum stake duration will be reset, even if your share remains in the same category as before. So make sure you're willing to stake for that minimum duration again before adding any new tokens. This minimum stake length is set for a reason, so bear in mind that there are penalties written in the code that will run up pretty high if you unstake too early. The smart contract will look at the percentage of days left in the minimum duration of your stake and will penalize you proportionally. Let's pretend for a minute that you're a whale and you're 270 days into your stake when you decide to end stake. In other words, you have served 75% of your minimum stake. As you failed to serve the remaining 25% of your stake, you will therefore receive a penalty of an equal 25%. It's important to know that these penalties are deducted from both your Hedron principal and your Icosa yield. What happens to the earnings of these penalties greatly benefits the other stakers. Half of the penalties on the Hedron tokens will be burned. And if you remember from before, this burning benefits the amount of Icosa that will be minted into the staking pools. The other half is allocated to the Icosa staking pool. The penalties on the Icosa tokens, on the other hand, are divided equally amongst all staking pools, being the Hedron, Icosa, and WAATSA staking pools. I'll explain these last two in a moment, but first a quick word about the bigger pays better bonus. It was the founder's intention to implement a bigger pays better bonus. However, due to a complex mathematical error in the code, it turns out that nobody was receiving any of these bonuses. And since Icosa is a decentralized application with immutable code, this is something that cannot be fixed or changed. Not that big of a problem, as it doesn't form a threat to the application itself, so no major consequences. To reach a concession, though, the founder burned a large amount of Hedron tokens in the Proof of Benevolence protocol, providing those who were already staked with a substantial portion of yield. This was beneficial for stakes of all sizes, but moving forward, there won't be any bigger pays better bonuses. Anyway, The third way to mint Icosa is by staking Icosa itself. This way, you'll not only earn Icosa as yield, but also Hedron. This Hedron yield comes from the amount that was borrowed in the HSI buyback feature, if you remember this. Feel free to skip back and forth using the timestamps below to refresh your memory. Second to that, half of the Hedron emergency end stake penalties are added to this pool as mentioned a moment ago. The Icosa yield, on the other hand, will be minted into the pool after calculating the total amount of Hedron burned divided by the HEX share rate. In addition, 1/3 of the Icosa emergency end stake penalties are also added to the pool. So the Icosa yield in this pool is the same as it is in the Hedron pool, but you have the additional Hedron yield. Actually, aside from the Hedron yield, the whole mechanism works the same way. Staking points are used to determine your daily yield from the staking pool. There's no maximum stake, and the minimum stakes are exactly the same. Only one stake per wallet with the ability to add tokens over time. Emergency end stake penalties are proportional to the percentage of days left in your minimum stake. The earnings from these penalties are distributed in the same way as well. Half of the Hedron earnings are burned, while the other half are added to the Icosa staking pool. The Icosa earnings will also be split equally between all of the staking pools. This brings us to the last staking pool in the Icosa dApp, the WAATSA staking pool, which stands for We Are All the SA. This is a private pool in which you could have only participated during the first 14 days of the protocol. In this period, you were able to purchase WAATSA NFTs directly from the application to gain a share in the staking pool. Those who bought these NFTs were allocated 1 staking point per dollar they invested. Unlike the other staking pools, it is possible to own multiple stakes per wallet. Though, at the moment of making this video, the period of entering has already ended. So you can no longer create these NFTs. It is possible, however, to buy them from other users if they were to make them available on an NFT marketplace. This is the only way left to get yourself a share into this pool. It's definitely worth the consideration, as there's lots of yield allocated to this pool, and your total share in this pool can only increase over time. The Icosa yield undergoes the same calculations to mint additional tokens as in the other pools. The burned Hedron from the previous day will be divided by the HEX share rate, and next to that, the pool will also receive its cut from the Icosa emergency end stake penalties. To top it off, the WAATSA pool also receives a copy of all Icosa bonuses from the HSI Buy Backs. This yield will be added to the balance of a staker on a daily basis and can be withdrawn at any time. There's no minimum stake length and there's no maximum stake length, which positions the decision of end staking exclusively in the user's hands completely from the start. But you have to bear in mind that to collect the yield, one must unstake, which will then burn the NFT. This removes the possibility of receiving any further yield without the possibility of ever re-entering the pool. This means that those who stake the longest get a bigger share of the staking pool every time somebody unstakes, resulting in more and more yield. This continues until only one person remains, who will then receive all the yield accumulated by the pool until he chooses to collect his earnings. Delay gratification for the biggest rewards. It's quite a lot to take in, I know, but the ability to earn all that trustless yield in one decentralized application without any middlemen involved is interesting, to say the least. So let it sink in for a while and then come back for a second view, as it will be easier to fully understand. Like and subscribe if you've learned anything and want to see more content like this. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.